This is Pod Strangely Warmed, a place where we tell the good Methodist story, where we have conversations that invite followers of Jesus to seek after that loving, just, and free world that God imagines for us all, and have a little fun along the way. Hi, and welcome to Pod Strangely Warmed. I'm Daniel Hawkins, your host, and as we make our way into this back-to-school season here on the podcast, we are joining the rest of the annual conference and the conferences that will make up the Horizon Texas Conference in encouraging you and your churches to take your next step in our back-to-school ministry partnerships between church and school. And today, to help us encourage and to celebrate the best of what these kind of partnerships can be, I'm joined by Matt Ford, the principal at Santa Fe Elementary School in Cleburne, Texas, and Reverend Melissa McDuffee, who is the lead pastor at First Methodist in Cleburne. Welcome to Pod Strangely Warmed.
So great to be here, Daniel. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm excited to be back.
Yeah. Melissa is friend of the pod, long-term podcast guest and frequent person who invites us into deep spiritual practice. If you pay attention to what lives on the shelves here on the podcast, you will see Melissa's Rock from Iona is one of those standing features here. As we get started today, I think it'll be fun for everybody to spend a little bit of time getting to know you guys a little bit before we hear about the partnership at Santa Fe Elementary School. Matt, you are the son of Mike Ford. You grew up at Glen Lake Camp, and while you don't rock the stash that your dad, right? You do have a lot of the same spirit that shares a love of children and young people and the United Methodist Church. What did you bring to represent yourself today?
Well, first, I want to say this is called Self on a Shelf.
It is.
I want to be clear that I am in favor of Self on a Shelf.
Okay. So you can still vote for Self on a Shelf. Up, thumbs up,
yeah.
Yay, thumbs down, cringy. And you can be thumbs up, cringy, and we're okay with it. Yeah. That's okay, too. So
all the dads out there.
Yes.
Well, see, mine doesn't fit on a shelf. My story with these is this year, as a way to sort of stay close to staff and to encourage staff, we started doing these bracelets, and we would put a word on the bracelet and it was kind of a special, when someone had done something great and they had just impressed you, then you would sort of go have this little ceremony where you'd give them this bracelet.
Nice. Yeah.
Now, there was a time when I was way cooler, and I would have known that Taylor Swift has a similar. Mm-hmm. I promise you,
y'all started it.
We started it, or I didn't know, and maybe great minds think alike.
Certainly.
But after this, people kept just being like, "Oh, like Taylor Swift," and I just wanted to say, no, not like Taylor Swift. So much better than Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift. Don't get me wrong. But so these bracelets. I'm a former camp guy.
Yes.
So
yes.
This is a harken back to those days as well. And I didn't realize how meaningful it was going to be for me personally, both to give and to receive those bracelets. But they've become a real part of my wardrobe, and people question about them, and it gives me a way to talk about public education and our school, which I'm super passionate about. Santa Fe Elementary, the best elementary school that there is in the world. And so, I've been given these bracelets over the last year that say inspiring and fervent and generous and passionate and lightning. I was lightning, and my assistant principal got one that was thunder, and there was a whole story that went there. So anyway, this was the first thing that came to mind in the last year. Nice. That was like, it was just super meaningful, and that was mine. What about you, Melissa?
So mine is on the shelf, and it's kind of like a little collection, but all of them come from Jacob's Well, and one of them is a picture of me drinking water from the Jacob's Well, because you can actually still go to that holy biblical site and drink water to this day. And it's a site where Jesus went and had that whole conversation. And that's just a really important scriptural story for me. I think there's a lot of, I won't get into the whole thing. There's, I have a whole sermon or something about it.
Several.
But, something like that.
Yeah.
But at the heart and core of it is that there is this woman who Jesus has the longest conversation with in all of Scripture. It's 60 verses long. And at the end of all of it, She's the first person to go out and proclaim who Jesus is before any of the disciples do, before anyone else does in Scripture, and we don't even remember her name. And I've always found that so fascinating, and just this kind of call and reminder of like, why are we going and choosing to spend time with Jesus? And this reminder to me of like, am I going to try and spend time with Jesus? Now, yes, she was at the well, not expecting to encounter Jesus, but am I trying to create those spaces in my life to spend time just conversing with Jesus? And sometimes not a whole lot gets said in those spaces, but it's important. And so Jacob's Well is that kind of reminder for me to go and spend that time.
It's such a beautiful story, and I loved it. And I'm still curious how the water tasted.
It was so refreshing and cool. It was very cool.
Of course
and
it
it's
was.
also super deep. Like, it's really fascinating. So like, you'll have a cup of the water, and then it's really fun to like pour the water and just wait and then hear it hit the water. Yeah.
I'm sure there's something to the metaphor there that we can unpack as time allows, right?
Deep in theology. Yes.
Of the well, and not just the woman, in that invitation to go seeking moments of Jesus, but when the Spirit shows up, in a way, do we sit? Are we willing to sit for the equivalent of 60 verses versus going, bye, Felicia, I'm moving on, right? As someone who has sat and under your teaching when you're preaching on this text, the first sermon I ever heard you preach on this was still one of the best 4 sermons I've heard in my entire life. So if you have a chance to hear Melissa teach and preach on that, do it. It is really an incredible gift and a blessing. So, but we're not here to talk about the well. We are here to talk about a different font of joy, partnerships between public education and the church, and kind of where our mission as the church to be followers of Jesus, seeking after the loving, just, and free world that God imagines for all people, intersects with some of the best people in our local communities, the kids and staff at our local schools, and specifically Santa Fe Elementary School. Matt, I know you've been the principal at Santa Fe for a couple of years now, and the assistant principal for a number of years before that. You've seen this partnership through almost a decade now.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit about kind of its origins and where it began, and what do you think marks the best pieces of it today?
So, first of all, I love this story because it's such a God story. Like, God is obviously at work in this. The partnership with Santa Fe and FUMC Cleburne was, I think it's 12 or 13 years old at this point. So it predates me. I remember it happening. I was a teacher at that point.
Okay.
But I remember it happening, and I remember thinking, oh, this is such a great thing. And then it wasn't until after that, just by almost happenstance, I was looking for my first administrator gig. When you're looking for that first job, you just go from school to school and you try to convince someone to give you a chance. And it was Santa Fe that gave me that chance. And it just felt like such a, and then I was ensconced, right? Every year I was getting up in front of the church, and it's such a pride thing because it's my church, and it's, but they didn't. The other great part about it is they didn't choose Santa Fe because, this, longtime member is now the principal, but it had already been chosen. It just happened that I was now the assistant principal, and now I'm the principal there. And so I just have loved, on so many levels. I've loved watching the partnership grow. I've loved that it's my church and I get to have that pride. And so I just love it. The things that, and it's changed over time, what the church has done. Started small with like prayer ministry and with snack sacks, just a little sack of food that goes home with kids at on Fridays to make sure everybody has food over the weekend if they're food insecure. And it's just grown. We've tried lots of things like tutoring and mentoring. For a while we had an after-school faith-based program called Cross Ties, teacher notes, feeding teachers, all manner of things. And some of those were really successful for a few seasons and then sort of fell off. And so over time, it's kind of come to, we have a very strong, the thing I'm most proud of, and I think is most impactful, is our mentoring program that we do. But the church also cooks 4 or 5 times a year for teachers, and that's, of course, wonderful. They write notes to our teachers and give them, I think, monthly, somewhere around there. And so a teacher gets a letter of encouragement. They do a prayer ministry around the school where they pray for, they go around and they physically go into classrooms and pray in classrooms. And then the really cool thing is they put a sticker above the door, and everyone at my school knows there are things we take down at the end of the year, but we do not take the stickers down because it's one of the joys when I have new staff and they get to ask, what are these stickers? I get to say, there's a church in town who loves you so much and prays for you, and this is the proof that they came to your door and prayed specifically for you and your kiddos.
And Snack Sacks.
So Snack Sacks, incredible. We serve currently about 70 kids, give or take, and that fluctuates every year depending on the need. And we send a sack of food home with kids to make sure that every kid has something to eat over the weekends. And huge. Some of Cross Ties has fallen off. That just stopped being maybe as effective or something that we could handle.
And Cross Ties was the after school program.
Yeah.
And that was, I think that kind of brings up a really important thing of this ministry started. It started with prayer, I think is how prayer and Snack Sacks is where it started. And then really it was conversation. It was conversation between the pastors and the lay ministry volunteers that were really involved, going back every summer and saying, what's working, what's not working, what do you need? Asking the administration. And so I remember we used to have a pen pal writing because we used to write because it helped some of the students who needed a little bit more help with their writing for one of the STAR tests. And then something shifted or changed where you said, really, we want to take, and I love it because one of your intentions of the way that y'all think through how you also utilize the lay people coming in is that you don't want to say, no, we don't want this ministry anymore. It's that we want to keep using these volunteers, but we want to make sure we're getting the best for the kids out of this. And so y'all asked us to stop doing the pen pals because it really wasn't serving and it was becoming more of a burden on the teachers. Yes. And so we said, absolutely, done. And then Cross Ties had a similar thing of, well, it was kind of like, oh, that's sad. But it also has kind of opened some new doors where we're talking with some other schools in town that it's like, hey, is this a need you have of where kids are going up in grades and they might have that kind of gap. So rather than say, no, you must have this because we've offered this to you for so long. I think one of the beauties in school partnerships that go on this long is not when you as the church say, but we've always done Snack Sacks and I think Snack Sacks and prayers are probably two of the ones that aren't going anywhere. But out of some of the other ones, to have those conversations of what best serves. And that kind of happened with you and I last summer when we talked about tutoring.
Yep. Yeah. We're always thinking about, this is about the kids, right?
Yep.
I mean, so it's all about what is the problem, and then how can our partner here help us solve that problem? I remember you coming to dinner at my house. Yeah. I've told this story a bunch of times, but not to this group. And you asked, if you could have one wish for your kiddos, what would you wish? And this also felt like the answer just immediately came to me, which is not usually the way things happen. And the answer was, I wish every kid had a positive adult in their life, period, end of sentence. And so that's an important thing to go, okay, if that is the biggest goal, then perhaps we shouldn't be, putting our eggs in these baskets over here. We should be putting more eggs in things like mentoring, where, kids really get to build that positive relationship with an adult that many don't have.
And one of the main distinctions at least from my memory of the partnership, right, it is the distinction between mentoring and tutoring, right? Tutoring is academically driven and academically focused, right? We're going to help you learn how to do math better, how to read more fluently, or we're going to partner with you in that. Where the relationships and that loving, caring adult who, and I always framed it when recruiting was we need to have adults in these kids' lives who don't have to be there, who they can't argue like, well, mom's supposed to, right? Or my teachers are being paid to. Well, it's like, well, what about this person, right? They're showing up every Friday of the world or whatever day of the week it is, right? To be there in relationship, because you matter, and in a world that often can overlook kids and many people, to have someone who has no reason to say you matter other than that you do matter.
Yeah.
What a gift that is.
Yes. And to build on that, just as churches start to think about or maybe struggle through how could I remember one of the struggles we went through was adults aren't always comfortable with the idea of going in and sitting with a kid.
Sure.
And so there were a lot of adults who, we got some smarties in Methodism, right? And they felt more comfortable on the tutoring side. And so it was always a little con on my part to go, oh, okay, sure, you can tutor. Like it's not going to turn into a mentoring situation. No matter what. You're going to have a kid in front of you, and that kid's having a bad day, and he's crying, and what are you going to do? You're going to go, well, we're here to focus on your math. No, you're going to go, hey, what's going on, man? And then you're going to have a conversation, and I just turned into a mentor accidentally. So to underscore your point, and I think that we all know this, you talked about a sermon that Melissa gave that was, this wonderful sermon. And we do have those where we remember. But think about when you were a kid and like I remember going to camp and I remember being really into a sermon or something. But today, I couldn't tell you what those sermons were about. I can tell you who were the adults that were there, what, we were having fun. You poured into my life. We cried about something together. And so everyone just needs to not panic about, I don't know what to say to a third grader. First of all, don't worry about that. Third grader
they will talk to you.
Will just have so many things to tell you. But it's not about what you say. It's about being there and saying, just saying, I love you enough that I'm going to show up for 30 minutes a week and see how you're doing and bring you McDonald's 2 times a year. And on its face, it sounds like that can't be all that it is.
And yet,
that's it.
That's it.
And it's so impactful and so important. And by the way, not to get all preachy here, but you need this too. I always say this as well. That's one of the things that I love about Jesus, and really the thing that makes me a Christian is he turns everything on its head. Yeah. And so you go to serve, you go to wash people's feet, and invariably at the end of the year, you come away with clean feet yourself and going, thanking. I had so many mentors come and thank me. Thank you. This is exactly what I needed, to reconnect it. There's something about the way kids are. I mean, Jesus talks about it, and the way, we all need to be like children, and we forget about that. It's one of the beauties of having a job where I get to be surrounded by children. It's hard for me to forget about it, but if you're not in that, you need these kids just as much as they need you.
Oh, absolutely.
And one of the beauties, you said 30 minutes a week. That's the model at Santa Fe, and that's the model I lived with for 4 years, right? In case you didn't know, I used to be the lead pastor at FUMC Methodist Cleburne, and so we've walked the same hallways and experienced many of the same things, but just this last year at Martin, where I serve now, we launched a new mentoring ministry based on the same foundational principle. Your narrative, which I've heard like 6 or 7 times
sorry,
now,
Daniel,
right? No,
sorry.
it's good. Continues to play in my mind because it is so profoundly true. How many of our young people need that extra person in their life who cares about them just because, right? And in the Christian circle, cares about them because God does, and we need to embody that. We partnered with Academy 4, which is a different framework for mentoring, but it's mentoring at our local elementary school. And one of my hangups initially was, Academy 4's model is based on every 4th grader, like every single kid, getting a mentor, but it's once a month. And so how do you recruit more people? You make it once a month instead of once a week, right? And I'm like, are we going to develop the same kind of relationship? over 7 meetings
I mean,
rather than
anything
35 meetings.
is better than nothing. Don't let that be the thing that stops you too.
Well, and part of what I'm celebrating is I had some hesitations coming in, but what I experienced after a full school year of because there was something powerful about having every fourth grader be in the same mentoring place, right? Because I remember often those first couple of weeks, that relationship hurdle was I got pulled out, right? And the rest of my class stayed there. And so is there something different about me, right? As that identified mentoring piece. But one of the beauties this summer, so we host Project Transformation at Martin as well. And a couple of the young guys who are coming in to do the reading camp over the summer at Project Transformation, the first time I go in to read with kids as a part of PT, they go, I know you. You were at Academy 4, right? And it wasn't my kid, right? And they recognized 5 or 6 of our other reading persons.
Yeah.
And it created that relationship space over the summer just because we'd all been in the same room, committed to being that relational mentoring presence. And so what I want churches to hear is like, it doesn't have to look any specific way. It's the commitment to the young people and the commitment to the partnership.
Yep.
It can take 16 different forms. The invitation is to just that openness.
Yeah. And it can take time.
Yeah.
Like, this has taken 12, 13 years to get where we are of like, we have all of these ministries and they're flourishing. And even this year, we have a new person who's kind of like our point person over all the ministries. And she was the behavioral specialist at Santa Fe. And now she'll be on a district level moving between different schools. But she has a lot of personal relationships still at Santa Fe, so she has some deeper insights. And so she's, bringing some new ideas to the table saying, can we explore this? Can we try this? And we're like, yes, absolutely. So we're going to try adopting some classrooms. And, so I think something that we're unafraid to do with our school partnership is to try new ministries and to let them fail if they fail and to celebrate the ones that are still hanging in there and doing God's work and, feeding, whether that's physically or spiritually, the kids that they encounter or even the teachers. Because, I've seen that also as a gift of when we can care for the teachers because they're the ones that are in there day in and day out. And boosting their spirits to go back into the classroom can also sometimes be such a gift. And so even seeing, what are the gifts of your people in your congregation? So if they're like, I don't know about little children, but I can start with, Good Methodist, we can put on a potluck, at the drop of a hat.
We can feed the teachers, yeah.
We can feed the teachers, and that's going to be the thing that gets you going, oh, well, the teachers really could use some help, laminating or cutting these things out. And if you start doing that, you're going to start getting closer and closer to those kids until you can't help but want to do mentoring or, being in the classes or whatever it may be that comes next. And 10 years might have passed, but if you're continually being that presence in that school, that's powerful.
Well, and part of the invitation is to not have everything be perfect tomorrow, right? But to take the next faithful step today. Yeah. Matt, you've been a part of these next faithful steps for a long time, and you're in the unique position to have 1 foot in the church and 1 foot in public education. What would you say to those churches who are considering taking their next step? As some of the, there are seasons where we plant seeds and water and we don't get to see the fruit that comes. And there's sometimes we plant seed and water and it doesn't come up, right? Mm-hmm. Right. The ministry fails. But what are some of the fruit that you are seeing as a public school administrator from these years of partnership together?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, my goodness. So first of all, I would say there's a palpable feeling of difference at our campus, and I think it's largely influenced by, we have these wonderful church members coming in to our campus all day, every day, and community members notice this, and so that's wonderful. We have, our behavioral issues are way down with our kids who have mentors. I agree. Having a mentor for every kid, oh boy, I would love that. Because if you're confused about anything, there's not a school that you could go to that is not, no matter what their economic status of the kids, there are kids in that building who need someone not their parents to pour into them and tell them that they love them, and to listen to them. And so, yes, I mean, we can talk about, we could look back at our academic scores have grown, and I like to think we've done a lot of that as teachers as well. But if you talk to our staff, if you ask our staff, what are the things that are helping your kids get to where they need to get? I 100% guarantee you, in the top 3 would be, and the mentor program that First United Methodist Church does is so impactful. And by the way, it's also seen in the community, and so it also helps you to, I don't know, it helps us to celebrate Methodism in a way like, not every church missions in this way, you know?
Yep.
Sometimes missions for churches, it doesn't look anything like going out of the school or out of the church building and into a school or anywhere else in town. And so it's also just a nice ancillary benefit that, you know, you get to say to the community, this is the kind of people we are. We go out into the community and we serve. And I just think there's a ton of people out there, maybe new to Christianity or don't know much about Christianity, who only see one kind of way to be a Christian or one kind of church's efforts at missions, that are looking for something way different. And I think a ministry like this underscores the fact that the United Methodist Church, this is kind of who we are as a denomination.
A couple of weeks ago on the podcast, Michael Ginger, who is our conference teacher, talked about kind of this theological aphasia. Like sometimes we lose the language to tell our story well, to say who are we and how, and that sometimes even when our language fails, we need big gestures, right? Like, and it's the big gestures that tell our story even when our words fail. This kind of partnership is one of those big gestures in our community, right? They see, I don't know what, they may never see the live stream of what the sermon is preached. They never may show up in the building, but they see that, you know, feels like every 2 or 3 years, the Chamber of Commerce is recognizing the Santa Fe partnership as the top partnership with school and church partnership in Cleburne, right? And they see that relationship. I'm still Facebook connected with the parents of the young man I mentored for 3 years at Santa Fe. And so I get to be a part of kind of their growing up, and they get to be relationally connected to us, even though itinerancy moves us away from that space. Those big gestures matter.
Yeah.
Melissa, as a pastor who's lived in this partnership for a while, you gave us a window into some of this just a second ago. But if you were to give like 1 or 2 pieces of hard advice or clear advice for pastors considering approaching, if they have no public education partnership, or they're just kind of got one that's at its fledgling beginnings, if they were approaching their local principal, who they didn't happen to have years of relationship with, right? What would be your kind of guidance and your pro tips, your first steps? What would you say to them as they're looking to begin this?
The first is just go have a conversation. Go have a conversation with a school administrator, and don't assume what they need. Ask them. So just kind of like what Matt goes back to talk about, you know, ask them the question of, if you had one dream or one thing, that one need that we could help meet, what would that be? And then as they feed that, as they figure that out, you figure out where you can meet that. And even if you can't meet it 100%, if you can only help 10%, give the 10%. Like, I think there's, I know so well that there are so many things in ministry that we can do that are good, and that we can get overwhelmed and all these kinds of things, that it can make us go, well, if I can't do all of it, maybe I do none of it. But this is so worthy. This is so worthy of your time, because this is future generations. This is pouring in love, and this is raising up potential new disciples without you even knowing. It's kind of, you know, you said that there's sometimes that we water seeds that we'll never see the fruits of, but we don't know how God's going to utilize that. Even Danielle, who's kind of helping organize all of this initiative work, who is a pastor, her early beginnings began with faithful Korean United Methodist women who went into her schools as a young child. And so I think that, we don't know what Santa Fe kids as adults are going to become pastors or faithful members of churches. And so release the outcomes. I know we have to turn in our numbers and blah, 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 blah.
But this is kingdom work, not castle work.
Exactly.
Right?
So go have a conversation. Don't assume what they need. Go have a conversation so you dream together, and then release the outcomes.
Amen. Matt, I've seen your head nodding along as Melissa is sharing her pro tips for pastors coming in. So maybe I'm going to ask you the inverse question, right? As somebody who lives in public ed, who has a heart for the church and whose life is deeply connected to the church, but if as a pastor is coming to you as an educator, what are the one or two things that good-hearted, well-intentioned people can unintentionally do to shut things down before they ever get started?
Well, I would say, number one, I would just say, public education we're a big bureaucracy, and while a principal may seem all powerful, they have bosses and their bosses have bosses, and so realize that it's going to be a process probably on both sides, especially if you're not super connected with the person. I'm reticent when people want to come into my school, especially religious organizations. Yeah. It's not an automatic yes, because I'm there to protect. I'm there to make sure. I'm there. As a proxy to their parents, and I just have to make sure that the things that I allow into my school are things that are good. So. And that are appropriate too. Right. We're not there proselytizing to kids, in the middle of the day. We're there to say hi, I love you, how's your week going? Right. We don't. So there have to be some lines, because we're and so that's important to understand. The cogs and the wheels can move kind of slowly, and so there's an amount of patience that has to be had, and also remember that primarily we're there to educate kids, and so some of the problems we run into are I want to come and volunteer at the school, and I have this 30 minutes that I can devote. Great, well, I can match you up with this kindergartner. Well, I don't really know kindergartners as much, so. My first job is to make sure that people that come in, and if I'm pulling them out of a class, that this is an appropriate time and that I'm not pulling them from certain things. So just know that there's a lot of things on the church side that maybe you guys are doing that I may not fully understand, or why are we not doing this? So just being able to be understanding and graceful of one another, and then on top of that, you have things like, well, now the student is absent, and I've come to the school and they're not here, and I just drove 30 minutes to get here. Why didn't someone tell me this? And so you're going to have maybe some friction or some areas of conflict from time to time, but just realizing that from the onset, and that, we're going to work through these together, because these kiddos are super important. Now, to bring it back to center, those are small issues that rarely happen, and much more, it's just a joyous thing to have a church and partner with you like this. And these are not problems that are not overcomable. That's not a word, but you know what I mean.
They're not a wall that gets in the way, right? Sure. It's small steps to step with.
Yes.
And as you were sharing, I was delighted to hear that it sounds like public ed and the Methodist Church have some commonalities in terms of the ways we make decisions and the processes that are involved. And just as if anything on your church property has to go to trustees before it can do anything, right? You've got processes and procedures. You're methodical at heart. And so that invitation. And also know, as you said, right? You are, in many ways, that person that is, you've got responsibility, right?
Right.
And you may know, as a good church person, that your intentions are the best. You're not going to proselytize. You're going to embody love and care for young people. You may have, but if you haven't taken the first step of establishing that relationship, be willing to give it time. Know that trust has to be built over time. Yeah. And so I know at our school partnership, we began with Snack Sacks, right? And so that 2 or 3 years of consistent weekly Snack Sack partnerships, and then mentoring was our second step. And like we're in the build process, right? Because we were in a different place relationally to begin with.
Yeah.
But you got to build that trust, and you got to build that kind of connectivity and relationship. Matt, thank you so much for your time here today. I know today is one of the first days back on your official contract with the school, and so this is good public ed work. To the superintendent of the schools in Cleburne ISD, who is apparently also a church member at First Cleburne, Matt's doing his job today. He's doing his job really well. Thank you for your time. After we shut off the cameras, we're going to get you to share some wonderful bits from Glen Lake Camp. Alan McGrath stories need to be coming.
Great.
So Alan, make sure you're watching this one.
There's a lot of young United Methodist pastors that I can tell stories on. We'll do that after the podcast.
Sounds good. Melissa, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for your care in this partnership at Santa Fe Elementary School. If you have heard something today that inspired you to take your next step, know that you aren't going to be the only ones in this season taking your next step in these school partnerships. As we as a conference embrace this back to school prayer initiative, so many will be taking that next step in partnership, whether that's to mentoring, whether that's to praying at our schools, whether that's to feeding teachers the best kind of Methodist casseroles. Whatever that looks like, know that you are encouraged to do that. And if you listen to today's podcast and said, hey, my church is doing amazing things, I want to tell that good story, email us, make sure, because we'd love to tell your story as a part of what we're doing in this back to school season. Until next time, I'm Daniel Hawkins, and this is Pod Strangely Warmed. This has been Pod Strangely Warmed. If you enjoyed our conversation today, know that you can find us anywhere you find podcasts. On Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, any and all the places, we are there. So if you want to continue the good United Methodist conversation that you've been a part of today, find us, like us, rate us, review us, and share with a friend so that the good news that is happening right here in our own midst can amplify even more.
I'll go to askjeeves.com and see if I can find it that way.
Hey, Jeeves, where is Pod Strangely?